The rain in Gotham hits harder than it does in New York. It's cold, acidic, and smells like burning ozone and old copper. Standing at the rusted iron gates of Arkham Asylum is Frank Castle. In his hands, he checks the chamber of a modified M4A1 carbine equipped with a wet suppressor. Tonight isn't a capture mission. Batman isn't coming to save anyone, and the police are holding a 5-mile perimeter. This is a termination order for the Joker. But have you ever calculated the actual odds of a non-powered human surviving this facility? We are running a simulation, a tactical gauntlet to see if peak human conditioning can survive superhuman insanity. Frank has his standard loadout. Once he breaches those doors, there is no resupply. He has to scavenge to survive. While the Punisher dominates street crime, the specific environmental and biological hazards inside Arkham make this a statistical impossibility mission. Let's break down the science of why he likely won't make it out alive. Frank breaches the East Wing service entrance. The power is already cut, plunging the corridor into darkness. This is your first problem: tactical disadvantage in an unfamiliar environment. As his boots hit the linoleum, a shadow detaches from the wall. It's Victor Zsasz. Before he can raise his muzzle, Zsasz closes the distance. This is the reality of the Tuller drill. Within 21 feet, a knife wielder often strikes before a shooter can engage. Frank takes a blade to the forearm and thigh due to muscle fascia severing. And here, in a filthy asylum, that wound is a bacterial time bomb. But Frank's pain tolerance is abnormal. He creates space, a pistol whip to the temple, and puts 2 rounds in Zsasz's chest. Threat neutralized, but the noise draws the real problem. Opera music starts playing over the PA system. Professor Pig enters the atrium with his Dollotrons. These aren't normal thugs. They've been lobotomized and pumped with drugs to inhibit nociception, the body's ability to process pain. This creates a tactical nightmare for Frank. Standard stopping power relies heavily on pain compliance and psychological shock. You shoot someone, they feel the trauma, they drop. But Pig's victims don't feel shock. Frank fires center mass, the target keeps moving. He has to switch to headshots, which are statistically 80% harder to hit on a moving target in low light. His magazine runs dry. This is the ammo economy crisis. He can't waste precious 5.56 rounds on damage sponges. Frank drops the rifle to its sling and grabs a Mossberg 500 shotgun from a dead security guard. Kinetic energy is the only language these things understand. At point-blank range, the shotgun delivers enough joules to physically shatter the pelvic girdle, forcing the Dollotrons to collapse regardless of pain tolerance. He clears the room, but the cost was high. He's bleeding, his heart rate is spiking over 160 beats per minute, which begins to erode fine motor skills. And he's used 30% of his primary ammunition on the first floor alone. We rank this encounter survival tier A. He clears it because of tactical superiority and weapon versatility, but the biological clock is ticking. He applies a tourniquet to his leg, bypasses the lockdown, and heads for the ventilation shafts to avoid the main patrols. It's a logical move, but he's walking right into a chemical weapon. Frank patches the bleeder in his leg with a combat tourniquet, cranking the windlass until the pulse stops. He bypasses the lockdown doors by prying open a maintenance hatch and pulling himself into the facility's HVAC system. In a standard infiltration, the vents are your highway, a way to move unseen and unheard above the enemy. But Frank is thinking like a soldier, and Arkham Asylum doesn't follow the rules of war. It follows the rules of a madhouse. Jonathan Crane, the Scarecrow, knows that rats like to scurry in the walls. He's been waiting. Frank barely makes it 25 yards before the air quality shifts. It's not the copper smell of blood anymore. It's sweet, dry, and heavy, like rotting burlap and old autumn leaves. He's crawled straight into a concentrated pocket of fear toxin. Scientifically, Crane's toxin is a potent psychotropic aerosol designed to bypass the blood-brain barrier and bind directly to the amygdala, the primitive almond-shaped cluster of nuclei in the temporal lobe responsible for processing threat detection. Frank starts to cough, his vision blurring at the edges. He doesn't see monsters. He doesn't see giant bats. His psychology is too rigid for that. Instead, the steel walls of the ventilation shaft dissolve. Suddenly, he isn't in a dark tunnel. He's back in Central Park. The air is warm. The sun is bright. He smells popcorn and fresh grass. He sees them, Maria, Lisa, Frank Jr. They are setting up a picnic blanket. This is the cruelty of weaponized neurochemistry. It doesn't just scare you. It weaponizes your specific trauma. Then the scene shifts. The laughter stops. The bullets start flying. He watches them die again. But this time, the physics are wrong. The blood doesn't stop pouring. The screams are amplified, looping over and over in a deafening crescendo. He screams, a sound of pure animalistic rage, and opens fire. In the cramped metal tube, the muzzle blast of the unsuppressed shotgun he scavenged is deafening, likely rupturing his eardrums and destroying his equilibrium. He is shooting at ghosts, putting buckshot through the ductwork, wasting critical ammunition on memories that aren't there. Every shell he fires is a resource he won't have for the Joker. He is hemorrhaging supplies. We rate this encounter Survival Tier D. Why not F? Because Frank's baseline psychological state is already broken. His fear response triggers extreme violence rather than paralysis. A normal man would curl up in the fetal position and die of cardiac arrest. Frank pushes forward because his trauma is the engine that drives him. He kicks out a grate, tumbling 10 feet down onto a hard tile floor. He hits the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact, but the damage is done. He is hallucinating, partially deaf, and chemically unstable. He lands in the main mess hall, gasping for air that isn't poisoned, but his pupils are dilated so wide that they look like black holes. He isn't the predator anymore. He is a wounded animal, and nature has a way of dealing with wounded animals. Frank stumbles through the swinging doors of the mess hall, his boots sliding on the greasy tile. The fear toxin is metabolizing in his bloodstream, making the shadows stretch and warp, but the mountain of muscle waiting for him in the center of the room is no hallucination. It's Bane. At this moment, Bane isn't on the juice. He is standing at his natural height of 6'8", a wall of scar tissue and discipline. For Frank, this is the worst possible matchup. The Punisher relies on pain tolerance and ballistics. Bane has a higher pain threshold and, biologically speaking, is dense enough to be small arms resistant. Frank raises the scavenged shotgun, his vision swimming, and pulls the trigger. The buckshot hits Bane's chest at 1,200 feet per second. In a normal human, this would shred the pectorals and collapse the lungs. But Bane's muscle density is nearly 3 times that of an average male. The lead pellets flatten against the sheer mass of his muscle fiber and dermal density, failing to penetrate the ribcage. Physics is a cruel mistress here. Force equals mass times acceleration, and Bane has too much mass. Then, Bane reaches for the control dial on his wrist. The hiss of the Venom injector is the sound of a death sentence. We need to talk about the thermodynamics of Venom. When the drug hits his system, it forces violent cellular hypertrophy. His muscles don't just swell, they harden like concrete, setting in fast forward. Frank drops the empty shotgun and draws his .45, but it's too late. Bane closes the gap with terrifying speed for a man of 400 pounds. He backhands Frank across the room. Let's crunch the numbers on that. A Venom-enhanced strike carries approximately 4,000 joules of energy. For context, that is roughly equivalent to being struck by a sedan moving at 30 miles per hour. When Frank hits the stainless steel prep table, the ceramic plate in his vest shatters. That's good, it absorbs some energy, but the residual force travels through his torso. We are looking at 3 cracked ribs and immediate soft tissue contusions. His lungs compress. He can't breathe. This isn't a fight anymore, it's an execution. Frank hits the floor, gasping. He tries to stand, but his equilibrium is gone. He has a concussion. The brain has slammed against the interior of the skull, causing a coup contra coup injury. His reaction times have slowed from 0.25 seconds to a sluggish 0.8 seconds. Bane picks him up by the throat like a rag doll. If this were a comic book, Frank would grunt a one-liner and stab Bane in a tube. In reality, Frank is hypoxic, concussed, and being held by a creature who can lift 2 tons. But Frank Castle is an engineer of violence. He realizes he can't win a kinetic battle. He needs a chemical equalizer. His boots are dangling above a ruptured sack of flour on the prep table as Bane tightens his grip to crush Frank's windpipe. Frank unclips his last fragmentation grenade, pulls the pin, and drops it. Not at Bane, but onto the floor, right in the pile of white powder. He isn't trying to frag Bane. He's creating a thermobaric event. The grenade's detonation ignites a particulate cloud. The result is a dust explosion, a rapid combustion that consumes all the oxygen in the immediate vicinity and creates a massive overpressure wave. The blast blows the windows out of the mess hall. The shockwave throws Bane backward into the industrial ovens, momentarily stunning the giant and disrupting his venom feed. Frank is blown in the opposite direction, slamming into the wall. He survives only because he was at the epicenter of the pressure wave rather than the fragmentation zone, and his low center of gravity protected him from the worst of the heat. We rate this encounter Survival Tier F. Survival here is statistically negligible. In 99 out of 100 simulations, Frank dies from the initial blunt force trauma or the crushed trachea. He survives this specific scenario only through a high-risk, suicidal tactical improvisation that leaves him in critical condition. He crawls away from the burning kitchen, coughing up blood. He has internal hemorrhaging, a severe concussion, and he is now totally out of ammunition. He drags himself toward the intensive treatment ward, leaving a trail of red on the linoleum. He is broken, but the mission isn't done. The Joker is still waiting. Frank kicks open the double doors to the intensive treatment lobby, but there is no tactical breach time. He leans heavily against the doorframe, leaving a smear of blood on the white paint. He has entered the final stage of hypovolemic shock. He's lost roughly 30% of his blood volume. His vision is tunneling, reducing his peripheral awareness to zero, a physiological response to the adrenaline dump finally wearing off. And there, sitting on a throne made of stolen riot shields and mannequin parts, is the Joker. He isn't holding a weapon, he's holding a detonator. This is the fundamental mismatch of the mission. Frank Castle is a ballistic problem solver. The Joker is a chaotic variable. Joker knows Frank won't hesitate to kill him. That's why he's the perfect counter. He hasn't set up a fight, he's set up a moral dilemma wired to high explosives. "You look terrible, Frankie." Joker laughs, tossing the detonator from hand to hand. Batman usually has more panache. Harley Quinn drops from the ceiling, flanked by two armed thugs. Frank dives behind a concrete pillar as 9mm rounds chip away his cover. In a fresh state, Frank would double tap all 3 targets in under 2 seconds. But with a severe concussion and blood loss, his proprioception is misfiring. He isn't aiming, he's suppressing. He blindly fires his scavenged pistol around the corner. It's sloppy, it's desperate. He catches Harley in the shoulder, spinning her around, and puts the thugs down with the center mass shots that waste too many bullets. The room goes quiet. He steps out, leveling his weapon at the Joker's head. Joker wags a finger, holding the detonator up. It's a dead man switch. My thumb comes off and the basement goes boom. All those nice doctors and nurses down there, gone. We need to analyze the engineering here. A dead man switch relies on a continuous electrical circuit. If the Joker is killed, his muscles relax, the circuit breaks, and the signal travels at the speed of light to the C4 charges. Frank's bullet travels at 850 feet per second. Even if Frank hits the brainstem for an instant disconnection, the thumb will slip. It's a psychological checkmate designed for Batman. But Frank isn't Batman. He calculates the odds, he looks at the basement vents, he looks at the Joker. He realizes he cannot save everyone, so he chooses to save the future victims. Frank pulls the trigger, the bullet obliterates the Joker's frontal lobe. The clown is dead before he hits the floor, but physics is undefeated. He goes limp, the switch releases. The explosion isn't a fireball, it's a structural failure. The floor beneath him disintegrates as the foundation charges blow. Frank falls into the darkness surrounded by concrete and dust. We rate this encounter Survival Tier C. Frank successfully eliminated the primary target, he accomplished the mission, but tactically, he failed to neutralize the environmental threat or secure the hostages. He killed the bad guy, but he didn't win the game. The dust settles on the ruins of the East Wing. Frank Castle is alive, buried under 10 feet of rubble, but his war is over. When we look at the composite data, we assign the Punisher a Survival Tier D. Offensively, he is superior to Batman. He cleared the threats permanently, but survival in Arkham isn't just about killing. It's about traversal, detective work, and non-lethal crowd control to preserve stamina. Frank treated a marathon like a sprint. By relying on damage absorption rather than gadget-based avoidance, he accumulated catastrophic injuries, lacerations, neurotoxin exposure, cracked ribs, concussion, and massive hemorrhage. Biologically, the mission is a failure. The Punisher killed the Joker, but Arkham Asylum killed the Punisher. If you want to see how a character with actual superpowers handles this gauntlet, or if you think Red Hood would have fared better, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next breakdown. Class dismissed.